Welcome to the Tzu Chi Center of Compassionate Relief in Manhattan, New York. I'm Bart Chateau, and I'll be your host tonight as we launch Mindful Eye Film at Tzu Chi Center. While these carefully selected films and post-screening conversations in this monthly program touch on today's global issues, they will also inspire us, inviting us towards a more mindful way of living. So tonight, our two documentaries, short film Stung by Climate, and then feature film Honeyland, take us on a journey into the world of beekeeping in North America and Europe. But beyond the activity of commercial beekeeping, what these films really inspire us to reflect upon is humanity's relationship and impact on nature. With the advancement of climate change, deforestation, encroachment on natural habitats, and other ecologically damaging practices, this is well worth considering. So following each screening, we're going to have a chance to chat with these directors and delve into these topics and issues more deeply. So let's start with our first documentary, Stung by Climate, which features the siblings who run Hyatt Honey, a US commercial beekeeping business. In the film, they share with us that something has changed since their parents first started the venture in 1968, and it's not all for the best. So without further ado, I give you Stung by Climate.
My name is Tim Hyatt. I'm the oldest son of six who together run Hyatt Honey. It's a business that makes honey and pollinates crops in California, Washington, and North Dakota. My dad and mom started the business in 1968. They were both school teachers, and they decided they wanted something for their boys to do when there wasn't school, and so they moved up here and bought a small beekeeping business, and we've had something to do ever since. So this hive, we were here just a few days ago, and we saw that it had a bad queen. And so we killed the bad queen, and I'm coming back today to give it a new queen that we purchased. So our queen cage here has sugar candy on one end and an open hole, and it's plugged by the sugar candy. So the bees will consume this, and in a couple days, they'll release the queen. And by then, they should be accustomed to her scent, her pheromone mix, so that they'll accept her, and then she'll be their new queen and start laying and build the population up. At least that's what we hope. The queens don't live as long as they used to anymore. They used to live 3-4 years. It was not uncommon. And now people are reporting less than a year. We're seeing probably more than a year, but not much more. So for whatever reason, we have to maintain the bees all winter long just to keep them alive. And something has changed in the last 40 years or 45 years that my dad has been keeping the bee business and that we've been running it. Something in the environment. The bees themselves have changed. The worker bees aren't living as long as they used to. A few days, but out of a bee that lives 3 weeks in the summer or 4 weeks in the summer, a few days is a big difference. And that lack of longevity for the worker bees translates into the queen having to work a lot harder to keep the population up. She has to lay more eggs. And so she will age prematurely. We call it burnout. So both of those things decrease the longevity of the hive generally. Why that is, I'm sure pesticides have a role to play, the varroa mite and the viruses it transmits, changes in ag practices, less things that are friendly to bees being planted by farmers now. Large-scale noxious weed control has taken away a lot of the natural forage that bees and native pollinators rely on. So there's a lot of factors that contribute to the difficulties that honeybees face. It's been about 10 days since the last rain we had here. But before that, it seemed like every other or every third day. Typically, the rain that you receive in May and June are what you're going to get for the year. And so these scattered thunderstorms like we had last night, they can really save your crop. if you happen to get one. Now, one of the yards we went to first, up by Bowman, got a lot of rain, looked like.
Oh, really?
Big puddles.
North or south of town?
West.
West.
It looks like a lot of the ones I'm putting queens in are pretty wimpy.
Yeah.
So.
Right, and that's the other thing. I don't want to be too hard on them. I mean, because I pull a cage out, and they're still pretty weak, and I'm just, do I replace this queen again, or? This was sweet clover last year. Yeah, that's what this. It looked like this last year, and this year. So the bees are weaker coming into this summer, and it's really late here too. I mean, we're only a week into pulling honey, and it's the 16th of July when we should have been pulling honey. We usually start right after the 4th of July pulling honey.
In my experience, the climate has everything to do with bees' health, their vigor, the honey they produce, how well they pollinate. But it has more to do with that year's conditions. We've never seen years that were identical. The only consistency is that it's inconsistent. You know, it could be hot, it could be cold. I mean, there's just so much, it's so much in flux. You can't really pin down saying it's hotter, it's colder. I mean, every year is different. As climate changes over time, whether it's a wet season, a dry season, whether the temperature gets hotter or colder, we just need to be on top of the bees. And so I see the beekeepers today are more aware of climate than they've ever been. Some of the best hives in decades ago were managed by people who never looked at their hives. You could have a laissez-faire attitude, but not so anymore. But as you can see, where, like right here, you had a hive that died, so the boxes are gone. The whole yard, like 1,200,000 bees. So in the air, you're probably seeing 60,000, maybe. I haven't counted them yet, but everybody does things differently. I mean, you know, and even within our company, I mean, every brother on his crew does things differently. It's just, you know, and sometimes you don't like that because it's like, yeah, I want it done my way. You know, the other brother says, no, don't do it that way, do it my way. So it's a challenge. I'm pretty easygoing, I guess, but some of the other brothers are a little more intense. but everybody wants it their own way, and it's kind of fun. Ahorita Juancho es pongo la caja ya. Está bien. Mira.
It's the end of the day. The guys are coming in with their honey. They left this morning and they had empty boxes on their truck, and they've gone out and checked the bees, put in queens, pulled the honey. Now they're coming back and they're unloading. The honey that they're running now, they bring it right to our uncapper. The cap has to come off. This is what keeps the honey sealed up. And so this frame, okay, con permiso. When we lay it on the machine, it has metal cutters that'll cut it off. Oh, you gotta turn the... Poco más rápido. See, now the frame is all open, and that honey's ready to flow out. They fill the machines and they start off really slow. As you can see, it's running. It's packed full of frames, and it's just going slow, nothing very fast. And then as the honey goes out, it'll automatically go faster, faster, and faster. On a good year with good honey, we can do 2,000 gallons a day, which is good. So this honey is North Dakota clover. This is why we come all the way over here, to get the good clover honey. Yeah, the U.S. only produces about a third of what we eat, and so we import about 2/3. So it just doesn't make sense to take much honey out of the country, and we just have to bring more in. We used to do about half. About 15 years ago, we used to do about half the need for honey in the U.S., but now there's not as many beekeepers. The bees, you know, their livelihood and their health has gone down, and so with not as many hives, we just don't produce enough honey.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that excerpt from Stung by Climate. You can also view the full 33-minute documentary at tzuchi.us/stungbyclimate. I now have the pleasure to introduce to you Nils Aucante, the film's director, who's joining us from a very small village in France called Ivoy-le-Marron. As it so happens, this filmmaker has a heritage in beekeeping. Nils, can you tell us more about that heritage?
My dad used to have bees. My grandfather used to have bees. For them, it was just pleasure. It was just a few bees, you know, a few beehives that they would go take care on their free time. For me, it became a passion first, and then it became more of a job. I now have about 400 hives that I take care of with my dad still. He's still helping me in the business. But yeah, that became more of a full-time occupation for me these past few years.
So you decided to give up filmmaking in 2018, and you were trotting around all these continents, making award-winning films, and you stopped it and decided, hey, I'm going to take over my family's farm, which it's been there since, what, 1898? Is that correct?
1894.
1894.
It was built in 1894, and my family has owned it since then. I'm like the sixth generation to live in this farm. I think it was about that. It was about not being able to see my family's farm fall into ruins, especially seeing it from a distance. I used to live in New York City by the time, and it was very difficult for me when I would come back to France every year, every 2 years, to see it, you know, a little in more difficult conditions every year, and like the forest taking over on the farm, and like the buildings falling apart. And that's, I guess, what made me decide to come back here. I guess it's also because I had the privilege to film the documentary that you just showed, Stung by Climate, and I spent almost a year, you know, across the world, seeing many beekeepers in the world using different techniques. I spent a lot of time with them. I learned more about what they were doing, their passion. And you know, beekeeping is very different, whether you do it in the US, whether you do it in France or in Haiti even. We filmed in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and it was completely different. So I learned a lot from that experience. And I guess all combined, you know, seeing the farm falling apart, and also that was a time in my life where I wanted more of a sedentary life, I guess. I just wanted to, you know, put my luggage down for a little while. I spent too much time in airports and airplanes, and I just wanted to settle down a little bit. And, you know, all that combined made me decide to come back here.
So you're 3 years into this, since 2018, of running the aviaries in St. Mark. So what challenges are you facing, or did you face in the past or facing now? And are they similar to the challenges faced by the Hyatt brothers that they speak of in the film?
Well, it's a challenge every year. You know, it's a challenge every day even. It's every day is a challenge in the sense that I feel like, and it's about the same for filmmaking. I think it's a continuity in the sense of every day you meet new people. Every day you have you're depending on the weather, you're depending on the elements, you're depending on things that you don't control. So I guess, you know, every day is a challenge, and you have to live with it. Is it very different from my life that I used to have before as a filmmaker? I don't really think so. I used to have challenges as well, but it's a matter of, working on yourself and trying to overcome them, and sometimes even make the challenges, profitable for you, make the challenges change you and impact you in a good way. It depends on how you look at these challenges. For me, it was very difficult at the beginning because, when you spend almost 8 years in a different country, coming back home may be difficult at time. You have to readapt, you have to relearn a lot of things, and you have to, reconnect to the people that you've lost connection with, and it's difficult. You mentioned the Hyatt brothers that I filmed in the US. They became friends. They even came here to my farm in France. Tim, who you see in the documentary, he became a good friend, and he came here twice. I'm very privileged to see him as a friend now. Because of that documentary, I was able to meet him, and we have very different way of practicing beekeeping. He has about 19,000 hives with his brothers. I only own 400, and it's already a full-time job for me. We do things very differently, but yet we have the same passion. We have the same commitment to bees and to the environment. We try to work with our environment, even though that might be challenging at times. But yeah, that's all. It's been beneficial, Tim, filming experience, and being here now and facing those new challenges every day. I see it more of an opportunity in my life than anything else.
Since you've embarked on this new course in your life, do you have any regrets?
No, I have no regrets. Sometimes I wish things were a little easier. Sometimes I think things were smoother and faster. That might be the slight difference than between beekeeping and filmmaking. Sometimes the beekeeping season runs throughout the whole year, and documentaries sometimes can be fast. You can film a documentary within a week or two. Here we have to adapt through a whole year, and sometimes it's difficult for me to wait that much. I'm used to New York and being, going fast and getting a lot of things done every day. But sometimes you just have to wait for the weather. You have to wait for the rain to stop. You have to, wait for the elements to be in a good condition. And that's also something that I have to learn. And I have to sometimes calm myself down and try to be better at that. And I guess every year I'm a little better at what I do. I still have a lot to learn, but yeah, it's a learning experience, definitely.
Obviously, you were inspired by this film. Is that one of the reasons why you decided to take over the farm and just take up beekeeping? Because this was something that you had done as a hobby before, or this was something that you knew you sort of got through osmosis by shooting this film and meeting the Hyatt brothers?
A little bit of both. As a kid, I used to go with my dad in the apiaries and help him, and I would have that smell of honey and beeswax in the house all the time, and I guess that also conditioned me in a way. But I only knew mostly my dad as a beekeeper, and I didn't really see other beekeepers as a child. Doing the documentary made me realize that there is not one beekeeping style. There is as many beekeepers as there is beekeeping styles, and you can decide on your own style, and you can decide what you do with your bees. You can decide why you want to do beekeeping. What's the ultimate goal? Is it to just produce honey? Is it to be in a good environment that you like to live in? That's a little bit what I do. I have my apiaries spread out in Sologne. I have about 25 apiaries around here, and every time I go to an apiary, I'm in a different place, and I'm in an environment that is good to me. It's like my office of every day. I spend less time in the office that I spend in the apiaries, so I have to be happy in my apiaries. I have to feel good there, and that's also very important. Shooting the documentary definitely made me realize that you have to create that space, that bubble that you're happy in. And that's what I'm trying to create every day with my bees around the Sologne area. Yeah.
As far as pearls of wisdom that you may have accumulated over the past 3 years, or even working under the auspices of your father, or even meeting the Hyatt brothers, what sort of pearls of wisdom can you share with us that we might find beneficial? As far as beekeeping itself, as far as the environment, as far as the possibly global impact, whatever you can share with us, we would love.
Yeah. Well, when you observe colonies of bees, you realize that, even though there are 80,000 of them at times in a hive, each and every one of them contributes. I don't think, I have acquired the wisdom to share, or to maybe, try to, guide people in their own ways. But I do believe that, we can be even each and every one of these bees. For myself, I see it more as a continuous path. Many people tell me all the time that they've believed that I drastically changed my life, by going from filmmaking to beekeeping. I don't see it this way. I see it more of a path that, I've experienced filmmaking, and I was very happy, and it was my place when I was there. And now it's kind of a continuity for me, and not like a drastic change to be where I am today. I think it's a little bit the same with bees. And I think if I can say anything to people who may want to change their life, or to have like a crazy project, because for me it was a very crazy project, it's believe that it's possible. And if you believe that it's possible and that it's part of your own path, then I believe that you can succeed in it, and you can achieve it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nils.
Thanks a lot.
And now on to our featured documentary. The Oscar-nominated and multiple award-winning Honeyland takes us to an isolated village deep within the Balkans. There we meet Hatzi Miritova, the last of a long line of Macedonian wild beekeepers. She lives in complete harmony with her environment, respectful of nature's fragile and complex balance. And yet, when a family moves in next door, things begin to change. Let's watch. And now I have the honor and privilege to introduce you to Tamara Kotevska, one of the two co-directors of Honeyland, who's joining us from Skopje. Why did you choose to make this particular film, and what were you hoping to communicate making this film?
So we were given this project as a signed project, and me and Ljuba were supposed to find the best subject. Will it be a person or some natural phenomenon? So we just started the research. And what we saw that was the most interesting for us were the beehives in the rocks. And from this moment, we started exploring who made these beehives. Was it a human? Was it like a natural phenomenon? And we discovered that there is a family of wild beekeepers still remaining in this area who do this. They go down on the hills with ropes. They dig the beehives. They put some special mud inside that attracts the wild bees. So that's how they make the honey from the wild bees. And Hatice is part of this family, and that's how we discovered her. She has other brothers that do the same thing, but we decided to work with her because her life was the most interesting and the most unique. Because her brothers, they have a very regular life in the next village with electricity, with roads, with school, with stores. They just live pretty normal life, just like people in the city. Meanwhile, Hatice lives like in the 19th century, and she's being the last, being the female, the last female born in the family. She has to accept the tradition to take care of the parents until they die. This is how it goes in the Kazalbashi tribe. So she was not allowed to have a family of her own. And she had to stay there to take care of her mother until she dies. So we figured out that this is definitely the most interesting story we want to show. And she was the most magical person. Obviously, when you see her for the first time, you just fall in love with her. You want to work with her. She's so charismatic, so enthusiastic, and she's so humble. When she presented the way in which she shares the honey with her bees, it was immediately clear that there's nothing more to look for, that this is the story we want to follow.
Amazing. So, on a personal level, were you environmentally conscious before you started making this film?
Yes, of course. This is our second film together. We've done a previous documentary about a polluted lake in Macedonia, which is one of the oldest European and world lakes. It's the Prespa Lake. And basically we worked for 1 year on this documentary. It's called Lake of Apples. Also won many awards in many environmental festivals. So naturally after this film, we just hooked up for the next subject, which was this one.
Well, how did this particular experience, this isolated experience with Honeyland, affect you and your worldview as far as environment compared to the previous film? How did this resonate with you? How did it affect you and change your perspective or worldview, or did it?
Very much, yes. It was the most different experience from anything I've ever worked on before. It changed me the most in the time of shooting, because we all had to accept a lifestyle very similar to what they were living in Bekirlia. We were sleeping in tents. We were eating together with them, cooking on the fire in the backyard, sitting on stones. We had to be part of this small community, of this small family. And this changed us all, because it brought us a lot closer to this environment than ever before. It brought us closer to nature, to the natural rules of behavior and of respect. And it was very different from any other shooting and from the previous shooting of Lake of Apples, because this is just, you go there, you shoot on a specific location, you come back to the capital where you live. But being in Bekirlia and living on this way, you're never the same anymore. It's like you want to, you're thinking a lot more about the next projects and how you want to spend your time in this world.
So the original idea of this film was to concentrate on Hatsi and her mother, that family, that particular family, and there wasn't an ending. Originally, you didn't have any sort of ending, but then the family, the nomadic family, arrives, and that changes the narrative of how this story is going to be told. Can you give us an idea of how serendipity was involved in creating the narrative of the story and its overall message?
The family, we were shooting 6 months before the family arrived at this area, because we started the first research in winter, and something like that, yes. No, actually in late fall, when they just had left. And then we were following Hatice for 6 months until the next spring, where they arrived again. And when they first arrived, we didn't pay attention to them because they were not important for our story. But then as the time went on, we realized that they are really closely involved with Hatice, and they have many conflicts. The bee conflict is just one of them. They have even more serious conflicts on different subjects. But again, it wasn't part of our interest in the story until the point when we saw the dead bees for the first time, and when she told us the story that how these bees of these people attack hers and why. And that's the moment when we knew that these people are so important for this story, because they are the natural antagonist in the story. And we, from that moment, we made strategy how to approach this family. So it was a long process because they didn't have the trust towards us. Eventually, we started making the first shots with the children, and then we approached the parents. But yes, I mean, it was, I can't say it was luck that they showed in the area, because we might even not pay attention to them by the end of the shooting. Or if they didn't show up, there would be something else that's a natural antagonist to Atija, because we all have our natural antagonist in our lives, you know, and if you stay long enough with your protagonist, you will discover who is this antagonist, and it's crucial for any story.
As far as the audiences viewing this film, so what do they ask about most in regards to the film, and what's most surprising or impactful for them? A particular scene or a character or a moment in the film, and what are the audiences? How do the audiences react, and from your view?
Very different. Like we've been all over the world with this film, and we got like all kinds of different reactions, but it was very interesting to see that in every part of the world, in every different culture, audience react as a mirror to the film. Like they recognize their own culture and their own problems inside the film. And this is what they talk about later. For example, the first festival that the film was shown was on Sundance. And there, we didn't know before, we didn't know that Utah was like a symbol, like the bee was a symbol to Utah. And that there were so many beekeepers in the state. Like we didn't know anything about this state before. So it was so interesting to see how many people approached after the shooting to tell us like everyone was a beekeeper. We've never seen like 90% of the audience in Salt Lake City that came, and they recognized with this culture, and they told us their life stories and how they deal with the bees and how they use these rules. Then later we went to Hong Kong in March, and it was so interesting that people there felt the strongest about Atija's solitude and about her small place of living, this little hut, how humble she lives. And many people connected with this, because in Hong Kong many people live like this in really, really small places, even though it was very nice that one older gentleman came after the film and said, I watched every time the movie was shown on this festival. Every time I cry, because this is my life story. I have a mother like this to take care of. I'm all alone in this world. And don't think that Hong Kong is much different from Bekirlia, who doesn't have any people. Because here there's so many people and still you can feel very lonely, just like Atija. So he connected with her and it was really amazing. So then we went to like many other places. We went to a tribe in Australia, in New Caledonia, and people were mostly connected with the nomadic family and how they treat the cows and this system with the animals. They connected with the relationship between the humans and the animals in the film. They were laughing at the moments when the children were hit by the cows, because this is what is happening in their lives where they're living. So it's very cultural phenomenon, how people can everywhere they can connect. In USA, for example, when we had a screening in the Lincoln Center in New York, somebody said about Hussein and about the Safed, the guy, the buyer.
Yeah.
When they saw the scene, they said, we are just like that. Like the capitalism is pushing this on us to behave like this, because they recognize the capitalistic moment in the relationship when between the buyer and Hussein. When he gives more money, basically Hussein becomes more greedy and he doesn't take care of the consequences. So it's very interesting to see that every society can connect with the problems they have the most focused on at the moment. It was interesting.
I was particularly struck by the maxim, take half and leave the rest. And that was really powerful for me, as well as probably a lot of viewers. Can you expound more about that?
This quote, we noticed one of the first days of shooting, when she was showing us how she was taking out the honey from the window of the destroyed house. And she took the honey. We were shooting the entire process, cutting, putting together the stones. And she took the pie of honey and put one half back, like on the ground. She covered it with leaves and just put more honey on top. And we thought this is some kind of sorcery, some kind of tradition she's doing. We didn't know. So we started asking her what she's doing. And then she explained, well, this is the remaining food for the bees. I have to share with them. And it was very important for us to reveal this on the part of the first shootings, because then everything in the film involved around this quote, obviously, because it's not very common way of living.
Right.
And did it affect my life and the lives of my crew? Probably did, but there's one thing, like how can you really use this rule in the consumeristic world we're living in? That's the real question. Like, even if you want to, how do you do this? It's so difficult because nothing is made to be shared.
Right. I know I'm not poking fun or using this as a light touch, but I think about the massive surplus of toilet paper that we did not have when the pandemic hit our country. And people were completely absorbing all of this toilet paper and things like that, and taking so much for themselves. And I think about that. I don't because we're still dealing with this pandemic. But I think about that maxim for if people would have left, taken half and left more, we would have not had the shortage of toilet paper. And so I think that's a great way to start, is if that ever happens to us again. But that's just my own personal opinion. So that it resonated with me. That maxim resonated with me greatly, considering the shortage of things that we had.
Thank you for giving this example, because it's really ridiculous. I mean, it's all over the world. This thing with the toilet paper,
yeah,
it was everywhere, and it's actually the most symbolical way to show consumerism, because the toilet paper is like the top of consumerism. Like,
it is
something that, in the end of the day, like, it's not the basic thing for surviving, it's like the least basic thing for survival.
And I'm sure Hatsia didn't go to the village to sell her wares to buy toilet paper, so I'm sure she doesn't have toilet paper. And she survived just fine. And I don't mean to make light of that, but it resonates with me in that sense.
I can add that we use this rule towards Hatice. Learned her lesson about sharing. We decided to share the very first award we got on Sarajevo Film Festival. It was 30,000 euros. And we shared it with Hatice so we can buy her a house in the village where her brothers are, so she can live there. So we found a way to say thank you for everything to her in this way, and we shared many of the festivals together with her, like took us everywhere, took her with us. But yeah, but in our normal lives, it's a very good question, actually.
What is her life like now after the filming and since the filming? What's her life like now? I heard she's back. She divides herself between her new home and going back to that region to do the work.
She has a new little house where she's spending most of the time, the winter, and then she can never abandon her real home, like back in the Kirlia. That's where the bees are. So she loves walking. So she just loves spending this distance of a couple of kilometers, maybe 7 kilometers.
So during the making of this film and meeting these protagonists and learning about their way of life, did it change you in some way about how you deal with your everyday life, how you approach your everyday life, even the most mundane things?
This shooting of 4 years changed all of us, the crew, the most in how we accepted the success of Honeyland, because we accepted this success in a very humble way. And this is all thanks to what we've seen, what we've lived in these 4 years. So everything that followed, all these festivals, even all the glamour of the Oscars, it's like we remained unchanged in a way in all of this, which is important because this kind of huge changes, this is a huge life change. Yes, I mean, you can never even imagine something like this happening. It's difficult to go back to what you've been before, but for me particularly, it was a reminder that I must remain who I have been before, because this is the only way I will keep doing great work because of who I have been before and how I have communicated with protagonists and with the world around me, and how I was looking for the subjects for the film. So also it changed my perception of time very much, because the time in the Kilia is almost non-existent. And you learn to be very, very patient. And the life we are all living is really fast, really, you just all the time, you feel like there's more than you can manage as a human being. It's always, this is how modern life is for all of us. And constantly, even if there's nothing going on, we need something because we feel empty, or like we just need some kind of adrenaline rush, or like a challenge, or something going on in the work, in the private life, but just spending time here was experience that gave me calmness for life, and to be ready to accept some things as they are, and to wait until the right moments and the best moments, because it really requires a lot of patience to do something good.
Very interesting. One final question is, what do you hope people will take away after watching this film and rewatching this film, which it's one of those films you want to watch over and over again? What do you think?
There's many things I would love people to not only environmental message, not only a message about sharing, but also a message about humbleness, and to just get reminded what it means to be a human being, besides what this crazy worlds and societies are pushing on us. Like, what's the core of our beings? And Atije is this. She's like the raw form of human being. So it's good to be reminded, like, that deep inside you're something that is the same with everyone else in this planet, and to be reminded of the basic values of life,
Well, we thank you for making this film, and we thank you for bringing Hatsia into our lives and being really the symbol of all goodness in all humanity. And thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm happy that I've been here today.
Thank you for sharing with us, Tamara. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Please tune in to our next episode of Mindful Eye Film at Tzu Chi Center on April 29th. We'll be screening the feature documentary Monk with a Camera and discover how, for Buddhist Nikki Vreeland, the combination between spirituality and artistic expression can create the most meaningful life. Do mark your calendars and join us.